Hey book buddies, it's Katy here, and today I'm going to be complaining about yet another Dan Brown book. Yes, I do have a new channel name and layout and intro, but don't worry about it, I'm still Katy's Cuddly Book World. It's just a lot easier to say. I also am aware that I promised you all that I would keep you company during quarantine, and I haven't really done a very good job of that, but that's because I was taking a summer course in groundwater transport phenomena and it was kicking my patootie. But that's over now. I made an A, so I'm back. So it was over a year ago now that I filmed my Da Vinci Code rant video, and I filmed it in my bathroom. I don't know why I did that. And at the time I was really afraid to upload it because I know that the Da Vinci Code is very well received by many. Surprisingly, a lot of people seem to really enjoy that video, and I really enjoyed reading Dan Brown, so I decided I would be reading all of the books in the Robert Langdon series, and I feel that it's very similar to the way that I described the Da Vinci Code in that it's fast food in book form. And what I mean when I say that is that it's, objectively not great, but it's really good and fun to consume. So I did actually really enjoy reading this book, and there were things about it that were fun, and I understand why Dan Brown's books are so loved. But that's not why y'all clicked on this video, is it? No, you want to hear me complain. So this book follows our flawless Robert Langdon, of course, and he gets a call that a scientist from CERN has been brutally murdered and branded with an Illuminati symbol. And Robert Langdon is a professor in symbology, so he might be able to explain what's going on. And it turns out that this scientist who was murdered has recently discovered or created antimatter, and he has it in a nifty little canister where it's suspended so it can't touch anything. And the scientific community has been really hyped about this, and the religious community, or the Catholic Church specifically, is worried because somehow this disproves the existence of God, which we'll get into later. But now the scientist is dead with an Illuminati brand on his skin, and the canister of antimatter is gone. This happens to be taking place at the exact same time as the Vatican choosing a new pope, because the last pope died under mysterious circumstances. So all of the cardinals who are maybe going to be chosen as pope have all gathered at the Vatican, and they're going to do their secret Vatican things to choose which one of them will be the pope. And we find out that the person who has stolen the antimatter canister is going to use it to blow up the Vatican. And as if this wasn't enough, each of the cardinals who could potentially become the next pope are disappearing from the Vatican one by one, and their bodies are being found at different points, historical points, on the Path of Illumination, which is this path of landmarks in Europe that the original Bavarian Illuminati used as sort of a rite of passage, and they're kind of puzzle pieces to find the next place. Is a whole thing. Anyways, these cardinals are being found at different points on the Path of Illumination, murdered with different Illuminati symbols carved into their skin. So now we have poor Robert Langdon and the daughter of the scientist who was just murdered, because that's a trend that Dan Brown likes to include, is the person murdered has a relative who's a very pretty young woman who will, instead of grieving her family member, go off on an adventure with Robert Langdon and fall in love with him because she doesn't have other things on her mind right now. So Robert Langdon and Victoria, who is the scientist's daughter, go on an adventure to discover who is behind all of these murders and to try to find the canister of antimatter before it blows up the Vatican. Very fun concept. I love it. Okay, so we have Robert Langdon, a Mary Sue in this universe. He knows everything, and he has to let the reader know that he knows everything. Robert Langdon likes to spit out random factoids, even when they're not at all relevant, just to validate his own intelligence, I guess. I can't think of any other reason why he would do this. And this is the same complaint that I had with the Da Vinci Code. It's just there's an awful lot of over-explaining and oversimplification of concepts that are not difficult. And there are also a lot of just random pieces of information that don't belong in the book. But they have to be stated, one, because he wants the book to be a certain length, and two, because he just wants to show off his knowledge. I find it extremely pedantic. I'll give you an example of this. There is a point in this book where a woman gives Robert Langdon a thumbs up, and Robert thinks to himself, I wonder if this poor stupid woman is aware of the fact that a thumbs up is actually an ancient phallic symbol for male fertility. And it's almost as if language and gestures evolve over time, and a thumbs up no longer means that. So why would this woman need to have this knowledge? And maybe she does, but that's not what a thumbs up means anymore in this cultural context. So when she gives you a thumbs up, she's not trying to communicate male fertility to you. She's trying to say, hey, good job, cool. You just wanted to let us know that you know the origins of a thumbs up. And I just don't care. So it's little things like this sprinkled all throughout the book. And as a reader, I'm just like, wow, we get it, Robert. You're very smart. Secondly, there are beats that Dan Brown seems to repeat, at least in the 2 books of his that I've read. And one of these that really gets on my nerves is the way that he treats women. Vittoria, even though she's just lost a very close family member who is extremely important to her, and she's dealing with his death, she has time to fall madly in love with Robert for no apparent reason other than he's here. But in the Da Vinci Code, he has another love interest. And is that going to be the case in every single book? Is there just a different kind of smart woman who's there for him to explain things to, who's very pretty, but not conventionally pretty? She's a specific type of pretty that Dan Brown approves of. And the relationships between Robert and these female characters are never really developed in such a way where I believe it. It's just that these love interest characters will be around Robert for like a day or under a day, solving some sort of mystery in a high adrenaline context. But there's always very little to no chemistry between the characters. If I were in one of these situations, I just feel like even if I were with a really cute person who is very smart and just attractive in every single way, if I just lost a family member and the Vatican's gonna get blown up and people are dying and the police are after me and all of this crazy stuff that all of these women go through in these books, I just think that romance would be the last thing on my mind. I think I would be really focused on trying to figure out what's going on, and Robert would be an afterthought. So for all of these women to just fawn over him like they do, I think it's unrealistic, and I think it's kind of gross. While we're on the subject of how Dan Brown treats women, there is a whole part in this book where Vittoria is, spoilers, kidnapped by an assassin who threatens to sexually assault her, and that's some motivation for Robert to find her very quickly. And I just found it in extremely poor taste and unnecessary. You could easily have her just kidnapped and held hostage. That would be fine. But he has to threaten her with sexual assault. I think he just puts it in there for shock value, and it's not needed. I get that she needs to be a damsel in distress so Robert can rescue her, but why does it need to be under these circumstances? And I just really thought it was, like I said, in very poor taste. And another reason why this particular plot bothered me is because this assassin who kidnaps Vittoria and who is behind a lot of the things that are going on with all of the cardinals who are going missing, he is a Middle Eastern man who is just one big stereotype of evil. And it's just very incredibly racist. We get some of this assassin's thoughts when he's kidnapped Victoria and he says something about how he's so excited to die and have his, how many, like 27 virgins after he dies. That is so, how do I articulate? Xenophobic of Dan Brown. It's racist. It's culturally insensitive. I just hated it. And then to go and make this man a sexual predator on top of all the other stereotypes that he has, and I just think it's really unnecessary. However, credit where credit is due. There is one black woman. She is a camera woman for the news. And I forgot her name, and she's hardly in the book. But she's there, she exists. We get this lovely bit of dialogue where it's explained to us that she is black, but she prefers to be called African American, which is fine, but I'm fairly certain she's British. And maybe I read that wrong. It's entirely possible that she is an American woman working in Britain. That's, you know, that happens all the time. I just thought it was a very strange way to convey to us that she is, in fact, a woman of color. So, the antimatter somehow disproving the existence of God. I just don't understand how the people in this novel are coming to that conclusion. So I'm not extremely religious myself, but I do take a lot of interest in the intersection between religion and science. It's something I like to think about, contemplate. I find it very interesting, and I love debates surrounding that. But I don't think this really is a strong enough case for the people in this universe to be like, ah yes, antimatter, therefore there is no God. How? So antimatter, just a quick short lesson. Antimatter is the concept that every piece of matter has an equal and opposite piece of antimatter that exists somewhere in the universe. To balance it out mathematically. So for instance, you have an electron, which is a negatively charged particle, and the concept of antimatter would say that because an electron exists, there must be an electron with all of the same properties as an electron, except it's positively charged. And when this piece of matter and antimatter come into contact, they would theoretically annihilate each other because one is negatively charged and one is positively charged, so they cancel each other out. And this is true, this is proven. We already know the existence of an anti-electron. It's called a positron. It's a thing. You can Google it. So that's what antimatter is. But the point is, this scientist has a canister with a blob of antimatter, which it should be difficult to have that much antimatter in a group. And so because this scientist has gathered antimatter, it disproves creationism. I'm pretty sure they could already create antimatter on a very, very, very small scale at the time that this book was published. So I don't understand how he's going to use this as a thought experiment against God. Am I making any sense? I just don't think it's a strong enough argument. And I think Dan Brown does this on purpose, just like he did in the Da Vinci Code, as at the end he's trying to say that of course they're not opposed and one doesn't disprove the other. In order to prove that train of thought wrong, that thought process has to exist in this book in the first place. And I feel like that's disrespectful to intellectual religious people. I'm worried that I haven't explained that very well, and maybe I'll just end up cutting it, but I hope that you understand what I'm trying to say, is that I think it's interesting, I think it's an interesting concept, but I just think he could have backed up that argument more in the beginning of the book to make it more convincing so that we have a point of growth, if that makes any sense. I will say that there were things that I was very angry about while I was reading this book that I intended to talk about in this video, but then I realized that of course Dan Brown wouldn't do me like that. He wrapped them up in a way that I approved of by the end of the book. It was really a lesson in patience for me. And one example of this is the way that he handles the Illuminati throughout this book. Now, the Illuminati, the original Bavarian Illuminati, is not the Illuminati that is very popular today, this concept of devil worshipping celebrities controlling the media and all of that. The original Illuminati was just a society for people who were intellectuals and really enjoyed science, and it branched off into a lot of different groups that still exist today, such as the Freemasons. Allegedly. People will argue about that, but that's my understanding. But throughout this book, it was implied that these Illuminati members were devil worshipping and were anti-religion somehow. And none of that lined up with what the Illuminati actually were, and I got very riled up. But no, of course Dan Brown knows that. He knows about the Illuminati, and that turns out not to be the case. So there's also an entire monologue that a character gives nationally about how science is destroying religion, which I hated, and it really seemed like Dan Brown was trying to say that that was the case. But no, don't worry. Dan Brown's not anti-science. It's fine, you know? So I will give him props for making me think that he was going to go one way and then actually having some clever writing. That was nice. Also, it has to be said that just as in the Da Vinci Code, I really did appreciate the way that Dan Brown incorporates research into his books and his stories, particularly about art and history and architecture. I find all of those things very, very interesting, and I am super interested in secret societies. I don't know why, it's just something that I love to read about and think about, and so I like that he incorporates the path of illumination in his story. I like that he includes real places that you can go and visit. I like that he goes and describes the history of certain works of art. I think that that's all very interesting, and I enjoy the way that he does that. So I just do need to give him credit for that. So that concludes my review of Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. I think I'll give this book 2.5 stars. Again, super fun to read, and I will be reading the rest of the Robert Langdon series just because they're extremely fun. If you've read Angels and Demons by Dan Brown, please let me know what you thought of it in the comments. And thank you all very, very much for watching this video. I hope that you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all again very soon with a new video. But until then, happy reading.